Medieval Dynasty is a survival game, but with a twist. But what happens when your town's survival is just as important as your own? So many survival games focus on the personal survival rather than the group, and that's what gives them the survival name. But Medieval Dynasty takes a different approach to this and makes the group just as important as your own individual survival.
I think we noticed it more once it came to co-op than we did ever before in single player. Medieval Dynasty really is that scratch where you have to go from primitive survival with stone tools all the way up to iron tools. And in order to do so, you need either a group of players or a community to do it. And the more players you have, the more resources you have, especially since they're going to use a lot more than villagers would.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the beautiful things about survival in Medieval Dynasty is that it definitely puts an emphasis on the, I guess, localization of resources. Because it takes like what, 1 or 2 seasons for trees to grow back, while sticks and rocks may respawn over time, they're not always going to respawn. And speaking of like taking forever to come back around, animals seem like they become more and more sparse the more and more you hunt the area. So you can actually overhunt being a solo player, and with a group of other players, you can really overhunt the area.
The more days you add to a season, the harder the survival becomes, because that's when you start to notice the depletion of resources. But you can always build buildings, you can have your villagers produce them. In fact, one of the biggest metas in the game is if you're in an area where there's no animals, just build a hunting shack and put a villager in it. They magically produce meat. But the trouble with that is that the more you build and the more villagers you have, there's another survival element that comes into play: taxes. And if you don't pay your taxes, and you can become late, but if you don't pay them by a certain time, game over. That's it. The entire game's done.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about being able to change the settings because in my playthrough, I wanted to see actually how I could make the village really be demanding on my survival. So I set the village food and water up to almost 400%, and I set the taxes up to 200%. And I'll tell you what, there was a couple of seasons of me playing my playthrough where I had to go and fetch food for my people and to take care of them. Actually, once I got a water well going, that kind of took care of itself. But I found myself hunting for my village more often than not. And that was awesome until I got through a full year and saw that my taxes were over 1,200. It's
Yeah,
over.
that first
And I'm
year.
all like, ah!
If you've got a dedicated team who knows what they're doing and you build your village really big, you could run into 3,000 gold taxes by the end of the first year. Which is why one of the first things I do is invest in the farmlands. You know, you grow flax to make the linen thread so that you can make bows and other things like that. But most important thing is if you work on the fields yourself, you get your farming perks up so that you reap more of what you sow. And selling the seeds will get you that money in one season. But it's interesting you brought up increasing the villager needs, because my advice to anybody is if you're playing a shorter amount of time, I highly recommend you increase the villager needs. It makes the game more stressful. But if you're playing with 5, 10, 20, maybe even 30 days a season, the villager needs will literally break and destroy the game. Like you will not be able to keep up. There just won't be anything after a while. So it's cool that you could change the settings like that. The other day, my Dynasty co-op team and we ramped up the enemy health and damage for bandits and animals up to 1,000%. And it took us 9 stabs with a knife in a crow who was stuck in a building to kill it. I threw an iron spear at the crow and it got stuck in it and it flew away and took my spear. It was the funniest thing, but that's where this game's magic comes in.
And it's really interesting. You talk about taxation and some of these other mechanics happening in the background because that's where a lot of the, I guess, survival elements start coming into play. You could say that you having to sell supplies, the danger of your town or having to take care of these people is the fact that you have to go pay taxes, and the journey itself can be treacherous for you as the person who's providing the money to pay these taxes, right, Earl?
Exactly. And they don't favor people who don't pay their taxes. So their happiness will go down. If their houses aren't decorated, their happiness won't ever hit 100, which is kind of like a safety net in this game. And once people become too unhappy, if they have a lack of resources, for example, or if you have them tasked on a job and there's no tools or resources to produce it, then what ends up happening is they will leave. Every time they leave, you
Mm.
lose dynasty reputation. Lose too much dynasty reputation, you can't recruit new villagers. They'll tell you, I don't know you, maybe get your reputation up, which means now you got to go out and quest. So, on top of paying your taxes, managing your town, now you got to worry about going out and doing things for people to get your dynasty reputation up. That's when the survival elements come in. It's when you go out on your own to make sure that C gets done. You have to go get A and B. That's where the risk is.
Do you think that medieval dynasty is ever going to include like elements that actually make taking care of your town like part of the survival, not just part of the progression? Like bandits, and maybe they're going to eventually be killable because I know that they do have infinite health when they're inside your town, and most predators, animal wise and bandit wise, just leave them alone. Do you ever think medieval dynasty is going to give these kind of mechanics?
I do. In fact, the big update that was supposed to be coming out, which has been delayed, they've got a lot going on in their team. The big update that was supposed to come out was supposed to be Dynastic Crest so that you could create your own coat of arms. It was supposed to be swords, armor, and anytime they issue weapons or armor out to the people like they've done in the past, the bandits get them as well. And there's even talks about forming bandit raids. But when you look at the pictures on their roadmap, a lot of us are theorizing you're not just going to be dealing with bandits. The story of the solo campaign when you're Racemir is that you fled a valley because of this army attacking the nation and killing your parents, and you've come to this valley to settle. But when you look at the roadmap, the soldiers, the armed troops in that picture chasing after your character, they're wearing the same exact armor and clothing as the soldiers in that intro video. So it makes you wonder if maybe once
Oh,
all that comes out, maybe we'll see militants coming in. And the other thing that has me hopeful is that Sengoku Dynasty has a guard system because they can get attacked by bandits and animals. And it's being so well received, it would be foolish for Toplets not to put it into the game.
well, this has been a wonderful and interesting discussion about Medieval Dynasty and how it's taken some of the town mechanics inside of it and made it part of the progression and survival in the game. We are excited to see more coming from Medieval Dynasty with its future upcoming update, but join me in thanking Jarl Goats for coming in here and being part of the show as a host. You can find his Twitch down below. Make sure to watch it. Plays Medieval Dynasty a lot. Probably more than it is actually prescribed by a health therapist, but who knows. And also make sure to check out our producer, Red Falcon. He does mods for DayZ along with some other cool stuff, and his link is down below too. Thank you very much for watching Stay Survival, and we'll see you later. Ta-ta for now.
Bye.